What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and in this video I'm going to explain how to beat the new version of Focused Fault, which is the Obsession boss in Darkest Dungeon 2. And we're going to go over the general strategy, the phases of the fight, and what heroes as well as items can be good to help you get victory. The general strategy for the boss in this current iteration is to make sure that you can do a lot of damage. It helps if your tanks have access to taunt through items or skills. And finally, the main gimmick of the fight besides the scene tokens is that the boss will copy all of your positive tokens upon a critical hit, which means if you have any way to make positive tokens to help you do damage or survive, make sure that you're spending those as quick as you can so the boss doesn't copy it and then take them from you. Of note as well is that every single attack in this fight has 30% crit chance. Because of this, even though the damage across the board is a little bit lower than the previous versions of this boss, between the ample amount of vulnerable tokens and the crit rate that is happening, the damage can ramp up very fast and spike over a couple turns. When I spoke of the damage race and taunt and stuff previously, the reason is because of the other main mechanic of the fight, and that is the scene token. It's the orange one with the eyeball and the tentacles coming off of it, and this thing will keep popping up as the fight progresses. The big challenge here is to make sure that you're killing things fast enough so that a bunch of scene tokens aren't going across your entire party, as well as you want all the scene tokens to be hitting your chosen people like your tank. This fight can go south very quickly if the wrong person eats a scene token too soon. The strategy for the first phase is to really just destroy each eye individually as quick as you can. You probably could cleave them down if you have all the skills for it, but it's much easier to just focus fire and try to use your tank to taunt and soak up scene tokens while the rest of your team just burns down whatever they can as fast as they can. This way you prevent too many scene tokens from happening during phase 1, which should make phase 2 a little bit slower for you. The other reason to focus fire the eyes one at a time is because when they're in their smaller sizes, they will have an attack that helps them regrow back to full size. So if you do damage to one and then get it down to the small size and then hit a different one, that one will eventually grow back. Each phase of the smaller eyes only have 2 attacks. The first one is to give out a scene token and cause some stress. The other attack is to do some damage and add some negative tokens to you. The smaller they get, the more negative tokens they end up applying, with the smallest size giving out weaken, vulnerable, and daze. If the small and medium size eyes end up hitting you with this attack, the one that doesn't give out a scene token, then they will grow back up one size. This phase of the fight isn't too threatening, but you do want to make sure that you get through it quickly because the longer you take, the more scene tokens are coming out, and there's no limit to them, so your whole team could stack up to the maximum of 4 if you're not paying attention. Of note as well is that if an eye has a damage over time effect on it, such as Blight, if you hit it and shrink it down to a smaller size, it'll cure that damage over time effect. This makes it so that you can't just put a huge stack of Blight on one of them and then just leave them alone and watch them die over 3 turns. Once you've defeated all 4 of the eye stalks, it's time for phase 2. This is where the real boss appears, and depending on how well you did in phase 1, it'll dictate how well phase 2 goes, usually. When Focused Fault comes out for the start of phase 2, it will use Limerence immediately. This is the major attack that targets all of your scene tokens, and this is how it does most of its damage. The reason you're trying to limit the amount of scene tokens on your party as well as dictate who has the scene tokens is because this move ramps up in damage the more tokens that someone has. Ideally, you want all these scene tokens on your tanks because they usually have the best ways to mitigate damage either through defenses or self-healing. At the top of the round, Focused Fault uses Behold as a free action, which means it won't take any damage over time effects. And what Behold does is it copies your tokens and it applies a scene token. Alongside that, it'll try to apply either Weaken, Vulnerable, or Daze to the target. I was told by viewers that Behold can be taunted, so it's actually not a bad idea to have your tank not be super fast so that they can be taunted at the end of the round to taunt Behold at the top of the following round. The final attack that Focused Fault has is called Suppress, and what triggers this move to be used is that there are 2 combo tokens on your party. The way the boss combos you is if you hit it with a critical hit, that person will receive combo. Even if you only have 2 combo tokens, Suppress will hit the entire party, and it attempts to blind as well as stun them. It also does a point of damage, so that way if it crits, it's able to copy your tokens and it can get rid of your block tokens. Even though this move isn't a super nuke like Limerence is, the fact that it can stun and blind people in your party means that it is a huge setback in terms of damage if you get unlucky with the token application. There's very limited strategy for this phase, or really for the fight in general, because you just want to make sure that the scene tokens are not on your squishy units, and you want to do your best to keep the people that do have the scene tokens alive. One more thing to be careful of are characters who can generate tokens or like to have tokens to do damage, because if you're using someone like Man-at-Arms, for example, and you're giving the boss all of your block tokens when you get crits, it can really drag out the fight. As well as if you have someone that gets a crit token and the boss crits you and copies that crit token, you can actually have a feedback loop if you keep having crit on your team, because the boss will crit you and then take the crit. Then you get your crit back, and then it crits you, and it just crits you until the end of the fight. So make sure that any positive tokens your team generates, they are able to spend quickly. Let's talk about some heroes and items to use for this fight. You can make anyone work, so it's really hard to suggest just a few heroes. However, for tanks, I think that Man-at-Arms, Leper, and even Vestal are actually pretty good. The reason being that Man-at-Arms can taunt and guard specifically, which can be very helpful, because even though he might feed the boss the block tokens, he can help keep Behold off of your damage dealers, which keeps them alive. His ability to riposte also helps to remove the defensive tokens off of Focus Vault, like dodge and block, and if Focus Vault happens to copy a crit token, an upgraded Bellow can take it off. The next good character to use to tank this boss is Leper. What makes Leper really good in this fight though is that not only does he have a pretty good self-heal in Solemnity, he also can remove combo on himself, and he can apply Weaken while taunting the boss. So Leper's kit is pretty loaded from the support standpoint, because weakening the boss is not you giving yourself block tokens, and it also still lowers the damage that the boss does, and you can use it every turn because Intimidate has no cooldown. This iteration of the boss is probably the best value you can ever get out of the Monarch path, because you're able to not only weaken the boss but vulnerable it to help you kill it faster, and spam taunt, as I was saying before, on top of an HP boost. The final tank we're talking about is Vestal. She doesn't seem like she'd be super good at first, but she has the ability to guard and stress heal, which can be nice. Her consecrations trigger on your turn, so if you use Consecration of Light and you get a crit token, you spend it immediately. You don't have to risk Focus Vault copying it from you, although the defensive ones from Fortitude it can, but that's a risk you take. And she has some other really good support abilities. She can cleanse stun with Ministrations, and she has a couple heals to keep your party alive. There are quite a few combat items that make the fight a bit easier, the first one being Noisemakers. This is a combat item that gives someone taunts. This is nice because you don't have to use it on your tank's turn. Someone else can use it and throw it on your tank, so you can keep taunt being constantly generated. The next really good item is the Blood. You can get this from Academic Studies or from the Tick Pet. This one's a bit harder to thread the needle with because you give yourself crit, which means that you're going to combo yourself after you use it. But if you have a plan to deal with suppress or a way to remove combo, it's still a great damage boosting item. Our third combat item is Intoxicant. This can be really good for your squishy units, your non-tanks that end up getting hit by scene tokens, because they may get crit down to Death's Door at some point, and having a bunch of death blow resist to help survive is really nice. The final combat item we're talking about is Holy Water, and this is specifically because it cleanses all of the bad tokens that can appear as well as combo. You can always bring some healing items as well, but I feel like these other ones are a bit more powerful and proactive in their use, so I value them a bit more highly than just regular healing salve. For in items, there are a couple good ones. Stun Resist Poultice can be really good just to not get dazed and stunned. Restoration Herb is still nice, even though you're not worried about the healing debuff anymore because it doesn't exist. The final in item actually we're talking about is Nightshade Concoction. This one boosts your death blow resistance by a healthy amount, and it is very welcome to have because there is going to be a point where someone's on Death's Door, and having this extra bit of insurance can be game changing. That's gonna do it for the video though. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you're thinking down below in the comments. Any other tips that you came up with, and your thoughts on how the boss is, which version you liked, because honestly it seems kind of split down the middle. Either way, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.